The Build Show Build Boston series is sponsored by Allura Fiber Cement Siding, Mitsubishi Electric Train US, Roseburg, Schuco USA, and Warmboard.
Hey everybody. So, welcome back to the studio. Let's talk about the project from a real general sense. It's a one-story ranch. It's on a beautiful lot. We'll talk about the orientation, which is set up beautifully to be a zero-energy house. But the house that's there, it's a one-story house. It probably measures on the order of, if you include the basement, maybe about 1,800 feet or so. We're talking 50 plus years old, with not a whole lot of updates to it. So when the clients approach me, the first question is do we tear it down or not? And do we build a new house, or do we try and use what was there? And the challenge of using what is there is that, pretty much everything has to be replaced. And by the time you're done taking it down to the level of, say, the studs and exterior sheathing, you've pretty much almost demoed the house. Now, there might be some things worth saving there, but the floor plan didn't work quite as well as it would have needed to be for the clients. We would have had to really do some extra stuff there to manipulate stuff to become a really acceptable floor plan for the clients. The ceiling heights, well, they were challenging in a lot of the spaces. The orientation was near spot on, but would also need some help. You being able to turn the house slightly, and just the basic square footage and the performance metrics of the existing house, and the fact that it was clad in brick. Now, brick is really good cladding in that it gives us a sense of longevity and maintenance, somewhat maintenance free on the siding side. But the problem with brick cladding is we really don't have any access, and we don't want to tear the brick down, enhance the walls, and then put up new brick. By the time we do that, we might as well just build a new brick house. So to cut all of that short, the decision was clear to both the clients and myself that we should tear the house down and prepare to build a new house. So here we go. We're designing a new house. How do we do that? We're going to dive into that exactly. I have a whole kind of series of what I call the homework that I give to clients so that we can start off the project. And we'll dive into that, but let's get going. New Build Show Build. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to get rid of the old house and bring a new one to you. The first thing that, as an architect, that I do, one, I walk the site because I want to get a feel for it. And not only do I walk it, but I walk it with the client because, again, everything that I do, I believe, is about what kind of questions I ask. So when I'm walking the site with the client, it's always interesting because they think I'm there to reveal information about what am I thinking, right? But what I'm really trying to do is extract what values they see in the site. So when we're walking around the site, what is it about this site that's important to you? What aspects do you like? Are there things that you don't like, or an approach to the site that you don't like? Things worth saving. This had an existing house on it, existing driveway, so some of that maybe, we're not saving the house, we're tearing that down, but is the driveway still, favorable in the condition it's in? Because obviously every decision is tied to a dollar sign. So it's really nice that if we can save something or reuse something, it's to the benefit of the project financially, right? So first order of business, we get a surveyor. Surveyor goes out, surveys the property, and then, as you can see here, they provide us with a documented site plan. So a quick run around the site plan. Got my good friend Big Red, and we'll hit some of the terms being used. You can see here, this is the property line property line basically traces the property line, right? This is what Jonathan and Scott own. And you can see the little pin points there that outline the property. So we know we have the property, and that is the bearings of the property. You can see here that it's a 3.1 acre lot, and you can see all these dashed lines that move around across the site. Well, those are contour lines. And what a contour line is, it illustrates the vertical difference in elevation. So depending on the scale of it, it might be a 2-foot increment, it could be a 5-foot increment, depending on the size of the property and the surveyor. This one here, it's not an overly large piece of property, so all of these contours are in 1-foot increments. And so you can see down here at the bottom, the very first contour line here, well, that's at 208. And the 208 is above mean sea level. And the surveyor has probably gone somewhere down the road. All towns have different top of manholes, top of fire hydrant. There's somewhere along this road is an elevation that the town uses to understand, the depth of their sewer system, water lines, and surveyors and such can use that elevation to help establish the elevations of the property. So knowing that, transferring that over to the property, we start down here at 208, and you can see as we move up through the site, the contours are pretty consistently close together, and then as we move from there up through here, they widen a little. So the spacing really dictates. When it gets tight like that, it means that that's a really steep slope, and when they spread out like that, it's a more gradual slope. And you can see out back here, you can see that, you have a contour there, one there, and one there, where you have a significant distance across those contours, which suggests that, for all intents and purposes, I call that just flat land. So you can see overall, as we analyze the site, we have a somewhat steep slope for about the first 20% of the slope. The second 20% of the slope is a modest slope up, and this goes from 208, to give you a sense there, that's 230, and then we continue up and we get to about 240 at the front edge of that plateau, and back here we're finishing at like 242. So you can see there's a significant chunk of the property that is probably about 55% of the property that is what I would call relatively flat, right? That we can manipulate the ground enough that for all intents and purposes, I just call it flat land. Now, we also see there's the existing driveway. You can see that. So it literally runs across the front of the property line and then turns the corner and rises up the hill into this more modest flat land. And the existing house is drawn in there. And you can also see that the surveyor has spotted all of the different tree locations on the site, and he also puts the diameter of the tree so we can get a sense of, is this a large tree, is it a small tree, etc. Now, in analyzing the site plan, talking with the client, one of the things that we came to terms with is, we really like the driveway. There's a really nice approach that when you pull off the main road here and go onto the driveway, driving across the property, you look up the hill to the tune of 208 to 240, so that's 32 feet in elevation, where you look up the hill and you get a beautiful broadside view of what's happening with that house. And then as you climb an elevation here, you're picking up that perspective of the house off of that front right corner. Now, obviously, this is the house that we're going to tear down. and we're going to put a new house there, but it's always good to, go to the site. And like I said earlier, is this driveway something we wanted to keep? And the answer to that was a yes with the homeowner. So we were going to keep the driveway up until this point, and then kind of rethink what happens with the placement of the new house and how do we approach the house from that point onward. And given that south is somewhat horizontal on the page, it really made sense that if we're making this a zero energy house, remember our performance metrics and how those tie in, that we really want a good face of the house across here so that we can accept the sun and have the PV array facing in the right orientation, right? The other thing that comes to play in here is you see there's a dashed line that sits inside of the property lines. So what that is, it goes right there. What this dashed line is that's the building setback line, right? So you have the property line, but just because you own all that property doesn't mean that I can actually put a building in here. So all different towns, jurisdictions, they all have different setbacks. And you can see here, we have 50 feet there, we have 50 feet on each of the sides, and on the front is 50 feet. So on all four sides here, we're consistent 50 feet. There's a lot of towns, town that I live in, for example, it's a 25-foot front and it's 15 feet on the sides and 20 feet in the back. So, and there's some towns that, depending on where you live in the town, you might have different setbacks if you're closer to the center of the town versus being in more of the rural outskirts of that town. They might become more lenient, the lot sizes are bigger, the requirements are bigger. There's, what they're trying to do is you have that 50-foot setback, the neighbor has the 50-foot setback here, so that people aren't building buildings right on the side of the property line where they're shadowing or causing a problem for their neighbors. So three acre property, 50-foot setback is really not that unreasonable. So what do we know now? Well, we know we have the sloping hill upside up through the page. We know that over half the lot is relatively flat and the sun shines down us almost perpendicular to a traverse line across the middle of the site, which from a zero energy standpoint, that's somewhat optimal use of the sun, an optimal property. So the other nice thing is you can see here, there's not a whole lot of trees. There is a tree line that happens back here. And why would I be concerned about that? Well, with solar axis comes not only the orientation, but we have the azimuth of the sun as it comes down. We want to make sure that that sunlight isn't being blocked by the trees when we place the house. So from this in general, it's pretty safe to say that, the house is probably going to go, we'll make this a nice bold line, somewhere inside that box. At least that's my initial thoughts in working on it. Now, we might migrate for some reasons, but that was the initial thought. So in the survey of that property, we know we're keeping the driveway. We know that this is sloping downhill, which is a benefit from the aesthetics, but it's also a benefit from a water management standpoint, right? Any of the water that I collect up here in the flatlands, I can put in a drain and drain it out to daylight down the hill. When I'm thinking about the septic design and where does the septic tank go and all of that, rather than have a pump system, I can now have a gravity system and locate that somewhere down here in the lower ground. So the site plan is not only about aesthetics, there's a lot of pragmatic decisions that also come along with this. Remember, it's always about, I'm going to be a constant nitpicking reminder about this, but it's about what questions you should be asking, right? So you have a site plan, yeah, it's about where do I site the house, do I have the sun, but it's also where does the water go on the site? When it rains really heavy, what happens to that that rainwater? Where does it go? How do I drain it? How do I drain the foundation water around the foundation? Where do I put the septic tank? Where does that go? Where do I drill for the well if I don't have water service? So all of those things come into play, and then we're set to design once we have these kind of basic parameters outlined. So one of the things that we do in the office is we have the 2D version here that we mocked up, but we take that information and we build our own model of the site. And you can see that here. I'll just give you the quick tour, right? And you'll notice, let me spin this around for a second here, put it in the same orientation as our site plan. You'll notice that the perimeter here, well, that is our property line that I have drawn here. You can see that there's a slightly different shade of green on the inside here. And so what I'm illustrating there is that is the building setback. So I have the ability to build anywhere in this darker green area. And you can see the gray area here is the existing driveway that comes up. We eliminated the existing house because we're not going to be using that in any way. So we bring in the information, and you can see here, you get a sense on what we talked about, that the property does rise up rather steep there. Then there's more of a modest slope there. But then as you get to the top, you can see that it is virtually a flat piece of property. There's a little outcropping in that back corner, but that's already in the woods and won't come into play on the house. So we take that site model now, and we're going to save that. We're going to put that aside, and later we'll merge the physical house model and we'll drop it down on the site and be able to develop some renderings and all of that good stuff for the client. But this is a very important part of developing a design for the house, because obviously the house is sitting on the property and we want to know the interaction of that. So, and it's beyond the physical pragmatic of the property lines and setback lines. I want to know, what are the views from the house, right? When I walk out the front door, what is that going to look like? What are the views off to the side? What are the views out to the back? What does the house look like when someone breaches the driveway here and looks up the hill? What do they see? So all of these things play a very important role. Or as we come around the corner here and I look at the house sitting here, what is that first part of the house that engages me as I come around that corner? So these are all the questions that, as the architect of the project, that I asked myself as we were developing the design. So we have all of that. It's time to start taking a look at, okay, when we have the site information, how does that relate to the design of the house, and what does that start looking like? Now, I will tell you that you're going to watch some of these videos and probably say, oh, I would never do that. Or, wow, that's a great detail. I love that. I should put that in my own dream house. The reality is that, we have a specific site up here in the Northeast. We have very specific clients who have a very specific budget that is working with a specific architect and a specific builder. And so a lot of our choices that are made might not be the most favorable choice of a builder and architect down in Texas or Georgia or California for whatever reason. But we will show you, at least how we put this house in a position for success. That's one of my kind of all-time lines, is that as an architect, it's kind of my moral responsibility that when we put a project on the ground, that we're striving for this position of success. It's going to be a great video series from the sense that the takeaway should be, hey, now I know what to do when I sit down with my architect or I sit down with my builder. This is the conversation that I should be having with them, not just letting them go willy-nilly and do whatever they want. That it really should be this collaborative effort where everybody's talking about the decisions to be made. So I look forward to it.